Welcome to the School of Love, the place where miracles are normal. Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel, the School of Love. My name is Maria and I am helping people discover their inner potential for love towards oneself and towards the others. From the very beginning, I must emphasize the fact that this channel is not part of my educational and research activities at Hiroshima University. It is nonetheless part of my privilege, joy, and sense of duty to propagate and implement knowledge, information, as well as motivation and inspiration outside the limited framework of academic endeavors. With that being said, let's dive right into today's topic, which is self-help. And in today's video, I'll talk about my perspective on self-help, starting with a definition of what self-help is, the correlation and the relationship between self-help and self-growth, then moving on to self-help and self-development and where the difference between self-growth or growth generally speaking and self-development or development generally speaking lies. In the fourth step, I will address the relationship between self-help and self-empowerment, or self-help and empowerment, more generally speaking, and then ending with, climactically ending with empowerment and liberation. So let's start. So what is self-help? Self-help is a type of action in which individuals or communities do their best, find solutions to problems they see themselves plagued with, and they do not necessarily search for professional help, but rather rely on their own availability, on their own potential, and on their own resources. This is why it's called self-help. Self-help is an important step in moving out of one's own reactive situation, so out of one's own self-inflicted, more often than not, damage, and then trying to find solutions, trying to move forward out into the large world. So self-help is relatively new, and in my opinion, it is directly related, directly correlated, and to a certain degree caused by the fact that we humans live much longer lives nowadays than we did, let's say, 100 years ago or 150 years ago. So some of you may know, but 100, 120, 30 years ago, people's average life expectancy used to be something between 25 and 30 years old, the longest. And actually, the more educated or the more affluent someone was, the higher the life expectancy. And taking into account that back then, when social welfare or social awareness of this wealth gap was not a thing, wealth gaps were huge and much more prevalent than we would gladly assume. This means that average life expectancy of an average citizen was somewhere 20 to 25 years old, which means that most people didn't actually have any major problems beyond actually eating and sleeping and finding a way to earn some money. And earning money, to begin with, also started very early on. As soon as a child, usually a boy, was able to move independently, there was some sort of lucrative, of monetizing activity in which he was forced into. So life used to be much more brutal, much tougher for the vast majority of the population. So they lived shorter lives, they were more intensive lives, and all these problems we have nowadays, mental problems, what they call mental health problems, emotional problems, spiritual losses, and this quest for finding oneself, they were essentially non-existent back then. So self-help the literature, the self-help literature, the self-help community, the self-help industry has emerged, I would say, in the past 20 to 30 years, when people living longer lives became increasingly aware of the fact that after the age of 35, I would say 35 is kind of border. After the age of 35, we still have decades of life ahead of us, but we are increasingly unable to find some sense of purpose, to find some sense of meaning, and to find some direction, generally speaking. Of course, there are, again, national, ethnic, racial, gender, and citizenship differences, as well as financial, economic differences. But as the baby boomers, the generation born in the 40s and 50s until early 60s, which is the first most affluent generation as a whole in the history of humanity, as they grew older, they realized they do not, while they still have money, or they're still in their at the top, in their top earning years, they do not have so much energy anymore. Many of them found themselves caught in the so-called midlife crisis, and they found themselves in relationships, in marriages more often than not, and in jobs, simply put, they hate it. And this is how I believe self-help industry, self-help communities, self-help literature, generally speaking, emerged and later on developed. So self-help, as I said, is a type of activity with specific challenges, opportunities, and resources, which helps an individual, which makes an individual, which is supposed to make an individual feel better about him or herself by his or her own resources. This is why, for instance, self-help literature was has become such a huge branch in bookstores, and later on YouTube, for instance. So what is the difference between self-help and self-growth? Self-help refers generally to a way of dealing with, to a way of learning to deal with life, generally speaking. It's not about improving your life, it's not about healing yourself, it's not about finding your own pathway in life. It's actually simply learning to find ways to cope more healthily than you potentially probably do in the present moment, so that you can live somehow for the next 2, 3, 4 decades of your life, which are still remaining. And we have nowadays, if we live healthy, in a healthy manner, we can expect to live at least 75 to 80 years. So if you find yourself in your mid-40s, or I think it starts with early 40s, and then by mid-40s one really has to realize, is forced to realize, I still have like at least 3 or 4 decades of life, and actually I don't know why am I doing what I am doing. I don't know why I'm together with the partner I'm together with. I don't know why I'm behaving the way I'm doing. And why is this happening is because, like, the age of 25, until the age of 25, we live in a sort of vital inertia, it's called, where this primordial vitality we all came equipped with when we were born, it lasts until 25, unless there are some exceptionally aggravating circumstances. We manage to survive somehow on a sort of initial energy, initial fuel, which we all come equipped with, as I said, by being born into this world. After the age of 25, generally speaking, so 25 is also the age by which our brain matures, and but particularly the frontal lobe completely matures. So after the age of 25 until 33, 34, but maximum is 35, there is some sort of not really stagnation, but we do not live this initial, this primordial vitality is not so prevalent anymore. It's somehow we start to lose our warranty, so to say, but we still have that strength and inertia from that primordial energy. And then after the age of 35, we start to decline. If we don't do something proactively against that decline starts. It can start earlier, given if under specific circumstances, for instance, like a sickness, abusive childhood, abusive adolescent, abusive relationships, difficult work environments, trauma of all sorts. So this decline, this biologically determined decline, starts usually at 33, 35. So one can start to feel it around the age of 33, 34, but 35 is kind of when it starts happening. But still, it doesn't become very obvious until early 40s, and then mid 40s it's an age. I'm right now 45. Is an age when one really starts to think, what am I doing actually with my life? It's also, stays together, it comes together with the fact that one becomes aware I still have like 10 to 15 years in my prime earning years, and then one really starts wondering, what am I doing in this world? So, and self-help is intended to support us in finding healthy way to cope with the remaining with the remaining 15, 20, 30 years. While self-growth actually is about growing. It's about making the best, doing your best to make the best out of remaining decades. And so where does self-development comes into? Self-development is not so much about growing, but about leaving a legacy. This is at least how I understand this nomenclature. So while self-growth is about individual growing, developing individual a sense of purpose, self-development is about leaving a legacy. It's about starting to care about those around you in a healthy manner, not in a codependent manner, as many of us have been trained to do, or have been educated and trained to do, but in a constructive manner, in a future-oriented manner, so that we think in terms of how this world will look like after I'm not here anymore to enjoy it. And self-growth is actually about enjoyment and about becoming your best self, so that you can enjoy your own self and yourself. But self-development is actually looking beneath your own direct and immediate sense of not entitlement, but sense of how can you make the best of the remaining years, but rather how can I live, not necessarily a better place, but how can I leave a legacy? How can I have a positive impact on this world for a time when I'm not here to enjoy it or to take advantage of it? And this is where self-empowerment, respectively empowerment, comes into, is a sense of when you stop caring about the benefits you might reap from your own development. This is where empowerment or self-empowerment kicks in. It's not about not caring in the meaning of, well, I don't in a narcissistic, psychopathic manner, but in a manner of I won't live forever. This awareness of death as a stage, as a moment, as a transition, as a phase in our existence, which comes by all means. And the moment we become aware of it is the moment when, but be aware at the level of accepting it with serenity. This is a moment when we stop caring about our own benefits and start caring about the world after we are not here anymore. It's a difficult bill, is a steep price to pay for sort of not enlightenment. I'm very cautious with the term enlightenment because it always implies some sort of superiority. It's not. It's simply understanding that you and me, myself, as humans, we are here for a very limited period of time, and we can, of course, do the best for our lives, but we can also do our best for time and for people who will be there, hopefully. I really hope so. When after the time we are not there anymore, but on whom we could have a positive impact, regardless how this positive impact might look like. So this is empowerment, and self-empowerment. And from this sense, there comes a sense of liberation, which I have been starting to sense recently, that actually everything you do matters. So liberation then somehow brings in a sense of responsibility, of increasingly deeply seated responsibility, that everything I do matters, and matters in a manner that is so powerful that I cannot grasp it, but it does matter. And this is the moment, I would say, when an individual, moves from being self-centered and trying to somehow find ways to healthily cope with the remaining decades. So there's a transition from this kind of self-centered attempt to find healthy ways, healthy manners to cope with life, towards a more world-centered and life-centered vision, which encourages us to be an active part of the world, to stop worrying about things we cannot control, and to do our best to find solutions which we can at least partially control. So the real meaning of self-help, of the books written in this area, of the YouTube videos released in this domain, or of all the professionals engaged in these activities, is, of course, to give you information and data on how to healthily cope with the remaining decades, but also on how to move your focus from yourself towards those around you and towards those who will be here after we are not here anymore. And I hope this video inspired you to look around you today, to share a sense of joy and fulfillment and contentment with those around you, provided that it is honest and authentic, and that you also feel that sense of joy, contentment, and fulfillment. And I'm looking forward to see you again very soon. Thank you very much for joining me today. Love and peace to you all.